Hello, everybody. Welcome to What's the Deal, Tenant Cube podcast. I am Darren. You guys have probably seen or heard me before, but you may have not known or heard about our guest, James Fernandez. Unless you're anywhere on social media, then you've likely seen him because James is all over the place, and we love to see him. James Fernandez of Fernandez Investments, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on. Yeah, the social media side of things, most of the times I'm sharing just kind of the nonsense that I run into every day through some of the units that I've acquired over time. I usually have been kind of known for, I guess, some of my early purchases that have kind of fun nicknames, like the Machete House is one of the most popular ones, I think, and we can kind of dig into the story there if you'd like.
Sure,
yeah. Would you like me to just kind of go into it now real quick?
Well, sure, yeah. Before we get there, James, again, thank you for joining us and for the introduction. I think that would be great because one thing I, found very interesting when you and I first spoke, probably about a year or so ago now, you had a really interesting backstory, and you seem to get into maybe some of the places others were maybe a little more hesitant to get into, and I think you've taken the road less traveled in a lot of respects. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Why don't you tell people how you got into the space and maybe some of those earlier accomplishments that have maybe been a little bit more difficult and may have scared other investors away?
Sure. So I started a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago almost. Back then, everything was pretty hot. I was just starting in real estate, and I couldn't really compete or didn't want to compete with people overbidding on stuff. I don't play that game. So I instead started looking for kind of what was left over or passed over and why, and try to figure out how I could solve those problems. So the first rental property that I ever bought was this duplex, kind of central London, Ontario, East End type of thing, just east of Central, and it was really shitty. It needed a lot of work, but it wasn't like a crack house or anything. It just was kind of run down. Spent a bunch of money on it. It was my first reno, obviously went over budget over time. I was not really well equipped in terms of my management skills or knowledge in general to make that go as efficiently as I could run something today. But it was a great experience, and with the market being as hot as it was a great opportunity to pull out all of my money and then some to do it again on my second rental property. And that one, it's a triplex in downtown London, absolute dump, but it was $250,000 and making $2,500 a month at the time. Again, needed pretty much everything, but I had two tenants that I could not evict due to the lengthy landlord-tenant board process. So I actually just got the one guy out last week and the other guy out the week before that. So 2.5 years roughly, partly due to my own mistakes with the landlord-tenant board process, and then partly due to the 9 or so month waiting time right now for hearings. It's been a bumpy road on those first few deals, but I learned a lot from them, and I have never been really scared of those types of deals as long as there's a great exit strategy on the way out.
And can I ask, were there anything that attracted you to those sort of deals? Was it strictly that you just didn't want to pay top dollar when you were getting started, or have you always been the type that enjoyed a challenge, or can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's a great question. I just did not want to compete for regular stuff where people were overbidding and multiple offers. I did that for a little bit, and I got so frustrated with it. It seemed like a complete waste of time. So I just started focusing my time and effort on solving problems that seemingly no one else could solve. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, the one property, the first one, the duplex, that was an off-market deal that no one was buying. And I asked the wholesaler and a few of my mentors, like, what is wrong with this thing? Why is no one buying it? It's shitty, but everyone knows that. Like, it just needs work. Everyone knows that. So why is no one buying it? And they're like, we don't know why. And I was like, screw it, I'll do it. And then the triplex, it had those problematic tenants, but it was making over $1,000 a month in cash flow. So again, I didn't see that as a problem. Maybe there's some sort of stigma associated with being like a slumlord by owning that, because it was pretty run down, and any repairs that you do would pretty much instantly get destroyed. So yeah, like maybe there's something like that. I don't know. But again, it seemed like a problem that I could solve over time. That was another thing, even like the Machete House, which we can kind of go into the backstory on that. But
let's explore that one a little bit, because I'm interested to hear. And whenever you hear a story like Machete House, there's got to be a good story behind it. So I'm sure everybody else would be interested to hear about it as well.
So that property is actually right beside that second rental property, the triplex. And in London, at least, I'm not sure about other municipalities, but when you buy property side by side, if you're not careful on title, the titles can merge on closing without your consent or sometimes knowledge. So you have to be really careful. So what I did, and I just got engaged at that point, and I had put my wife's name as 50% owner on title, so she owns half that property. And then literally right after that, there's this huge police incident where this guy like broke into the home with machete and like hacked some stuff up. It was bad. It was really bad. And I'm laughing now because it's funny now that it happened literally right after I bought it, but it was actually super shitty. Luckily, no one was killed or anything like that. But it was over like the dumbest thing, like someone stole someone else's drugs or something like that, like just nonsense. But yeah, after that incident, it's been called a Machete House in my books, and it's been vacant since, because it was actually that bad for like the kind of outcome of multiple people getting sliced up a little bit in there.
So there was actually an attack on people, not just on the unit. Like, your people were attacked.
Yeah, my brand new to me, I guess, tenants. They, after that incident, they vacated, so the property was left kind of abandoned because they didn't want to live there anymore for good reason.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But that really messed up my cash flow plans on the property. But it was also kind of you can't just leave things like that. So I had to call in a special team to clean up kind of the outcome of that incident, and it's been vacant since, and I'm waiting to basically tear it down so I can build something else on it.
Well, that's interesting. And, people always think being a landlord is going to be incredibly passive income. And when I hear stories like that, and I hear stories like our CEO, Andrews, I'm sure you've heard his first renter ever was an armed robber and a drug dealer. And, the majority of tenants are great, but I think what people often neglect is that life happens and these situations happen, and you definitely have to be prepared for it.
Yeah, it's just stats, right? Like the more you do it, the more you're likely you're going to run into something like this. Yeah,
absolutely. And so from there, where did you go? So you got, your first few units under, you've kind of gone through what I would call is almost like a nightmare scenario. How did you rebound and grow? Because, one thing I've known about you is you've grown pretty quickly. And I think maybe that's due to some of your styles. I know the first time we ever met you, you reached out to us to let us know, hey, you're just doing some networking. And I think that may be one of the reasons why you've been able to grow so quick. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about, some of your thoughts on growth and how you approach it, and some of the avenues maybe you've taken as you've gone throughout your journey?
Sure, yeah. Primarily, even like through my Instagram, I just try to add value to the people that I come across in some way. I think that is the easiest way to really be remembered by people when something else comes up. An example, I tried wholesaling for a little bit. I absolutely freaking hated it. I hated people calling me. I hated like pretty much everything about it. I sent out flyers and I just kept getting calls at like random times of the day when I was doing stuff and whatever. It's garbage. So instead, what I started doing is I started going out to lunch or dinner with wholesalers or realtors. And I spent probably half of what I spent on wholesaling in terms of my budget, sending out flyers and whatever nonsense. And it was so much more impactful because not only did they get a meal and a conversation, but I was able to tell them pretty much exactly what I needed and also help them if there's something I could help with for what they needed. So for example, they have a property that they need offload and I know someone that's looking for something like that, connect the dots. And now you're top of mind for something else that comes up. It's just like a symbiotic relationship that works really well in that sense. That's kind of what I focus on.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's a great approach. I think maybe that's one thing a lot of landlords and investors don't consider, especially when they're early, is the importance of building out that network and you kind of growing that side of things.
Yeah.
And where has all of that taken you? So kind of from the more difficult beginnings, so to say, with respect to some of the troubles and maybe picking up some of those, again, not ideal units. What are you doing today? Where has all that hard work and networking, where has that brought you? What is Fernandez Investments into today? What are you guys currently doing and working on?
Yeah, so right now I've kind of let the residential real estate growth in Ontario pause while I just kind of clean up. I'm not doing any new residential acquisitions at the moment. I've kind of pivoted to the commercial self-storage real estate side in Canada and the United States. So I have like 3 facilities now, just learning how to operate them, automate them. It's nice where you have actual full control of the asset and you're not handcuffed by the landlord-tenant board when people aren't paying for up to 9 months, let's just say. Kind of ridiculous that that's the reality of Ontario landlords right now.
Right. And do you think that some of those experiences that you had early on with like the LTV and the residential side, do you think that maybe that led you to making a little bit of the pivot, or was there some interest there that you just thought, hey, this is a great opportunity like you had seen before? What kind of led you to pivoting?
Yeah, a little bit of both. On the one side, I had so far this year, I've done about 40 hearings for.
Did I hear that correct? 4 or 40?
40.
Oh, no way! Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's frustrating. And I know, like people have asked, like why don't you outsource it and stuff like that? I do sometimes, but for the most part, it's worth a lot of money to me. For some of your listeners, if they know how NOI and cap rate works to equal valuation. When I can drive so much more value by getting these like crappy tenants out and getting the unit turned over and getting someone that is great in and they're at market rent, there's a lot of value to that for me. Also, just by not having people who are dealing drugs or in the hallway, sleeping in the hallway, naked in the hallway, like doesn't matter how nice your unit is. If that's happening in your building, no one wants to freaking live there. It's shitty. So it takes time to kind of get rid of that stuff. And there's like kind of, I guess, the debate on where am I putting them. That's not my problem. They're just not in my building anymore. And I'm providing a safe housing environment for the people that want it. So that's what I focus on. And then when I was kind of struggling through all these hearings, that's when I tried to look at an asset class where I could actually control it. So it was a little bit of both where my like experience, I guess, with the tenants and the landlord-tenant board made me kind of look for some other alternative where I could actually control the asset a lot more strictly.
So yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So a couple of thoughts on that, because that's a lot of time spent in hearings, and I'm sure a lot of cost involved for yourself. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it sounds like that has actually led you to be able to provide a safer and more enjoyable living environment for a lot of other people who probably didn't want that within their vicinity anyways. So I think that's a great value that you're adding. But what have you learned from all that time in the LTB? Like, what can people keep in mind when they get involved in situations that may be problematic or like that, or maybe where they have to take some tough roads? What advice do you have for people who are maybe considering taking on something that's less than ideal, or who are even going through, maybe the early stages of what you went through?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, what was really driving and motivating me was the cost benefit analysis. So I was working full time, whatever day job. Let's just say you're making $100 an hour somewhere, and you're working 8 hours a day, $800 a day before tax. That's great, and you're doing that 2,000 days of the year, $160,000 before tax. Let's just easy numbers. That's a pretty solid salary in Canada. Like one real estate deal, if you really deal well, can replace that.
Right.
And if you're like doing it full time, maybe you're doing 2 deals or 5 deals or 10 deals at a time. And now all of a sudden, whatever you have to do to make 10 times your salary, it's worth it.
Right. So the incentive is there if you're willing to put in the hard work. And speaking on hard work, one thing I've noticed, because I follow your social feeds, and I would definitely recommend anybody who's listening to this, go check out Fernandez Investments. He's always posting great content. But like even today, I still see you slugging away with a sledgehammer from time to time. And I've seen you doing guts and rips and replacements throughout the years. You're still involved on that aspect of it from time to time, like you're still getting your hands dirty. And why have you taken that approach? Like, a lot of people, they'll just, like you said, outsource. Why are you so passionate about getting involved on maybe all areas of the operations?
Yeah, so that's, again, a really, really good question. I know people push to outsource things very quickly, but one mistake that I see a lot of people make is they're so quick to outsource things, then they're just sitting at home watching TV. You should not be outsourcing things unless you're replacing your time with a higher value task. And in some cases where I am literally just sitting at home because everything's kind of taken care of by the team, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to the job site today and we're going to have some exercise instead of the gym. It's just get it in. It makes great content too, like people like seeing the dirty, nasty stuff. It's actually hilarious that my most engaged content,
like you're getting right in there, right?
The most engaged on posts that I've ever made have been like the nastiest things with content warnings. People love to see it. And my private investors that lend me money, I kind of treat my Instagram feed as sort of their own personalized HGTV episode. This is how I'm spending your money. This is what I'm doing to make sure that I'm giving you your returns that I promised you. And this is what it takes to get it done. So it's a little bit of everything there. So.
Right. And I'm sure you're more comfortable with it than you were when you started. But, one thing that I think may scare a lot of people off on that side of it is there's always the idea that owning investment properties and renting them out or flipping them or whatever you're doing, in the long term, it's going to become more passive, especially on the rental side. And I think that's a misconception. And then I think the other thing as well is that a lot of time people who are purchasing these properties for rental purposes, maybe they're like you, they have more of a tech background or a finance background or whatever it may be. And I actually think a lot of times they could be a little bit intimidated to get involved with that work. Can you tell me a little bit about when you started doing it? Like, did you experience a lot of hurdles? Did you make mistakes? Were you able to recover from them? And what was the getting involved initially like?
Sure. Yeah. So the first project I ever did was actually a basement renovation in my primary residence. I didn't have any of the tools, and I learned pretty much off of everything off of YouTube. Renovision DIY with Jeff Thurman in Ottawa. He is
Right.
fantastic, and I learned pretty much everything off of his YouTube page and did it, messed it up, did it again. But it still, like, the information that I got from that renovation was so valuable because although I don't do the work myself anymore, I have the knowledge to talk to the crew on site in a way that they know that I know. You know, they're not screwing around with me.
Yeah.
If I get a quote for a job, as an example for drywall, and I say, okay, well, quote me for drywall, and they give me a quote, and I say, okay, I actually need this part fire rated. What's the quote? And if they tell me, well, you know, it's the same, I know for a fact that they have not worked with 5/8 fire rated drywall. It's way heavier, shittier to cut, worse on the tools, worse on your back, worse on everything. It costs more money to do that stuff properly. And if they're telling me it's the same price, I know they haven't struggled through it before. Because it sucks ass. I did it.
Right.
It's horrible, backbreaking work when you're doing that all day, and you got to get paid for it. I don't want my team to suffer. You know, like that. I want them to be rewarded for the work that they do for me, and that's just an example. Another example when bathrooms are getting framed up, and the contractor's not putting backing blocks behind where typically you'd put the shower bar kind of screwed into the wall, or that type of thing. It shows a lack of experience, and that experience only comes from being in the game long enough to see your own failures or that you did, so you can adjust, right? In the same way, you can accelerate that failure cycle by learning from other people's mistakes and not making them. So that's basically what I did. I just tried and failed, and then watched on YouTube and didn't make those mistakes. And now when going into my job site, I make sure that they're not making those mistakes either, plus their experience on top of that. So I think fear is a result of ignorance. You don't have fear in the same way when you are educated, and that education is pretty much free on YouTube, so or platforms like this.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? YouTube is a great resource, especially when you're trying to pick up something new you have no experience with. So I guess it's safe to say that the time you actually spent on site doing that physical labor is almost like an education with respect to operating your overall business from the maybe renovation or upgrade perspective. Definitely was helpful in that regard. So with all that in mind, you know, it seems like you've come quite a far way. And you didn't get there with all traditional methods, I guess. You had mentioned that you got, you know, some of your positions through private lending. Was that something that you just thought there was a better opportunity there, or was that out of necessity because of how fast you were growing? How did you end up going down that route?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I kind of was introduced to it through a few different avenues. When closing the first few residential properties, I was told from the start that, you know, Scotia can only give you 10 mortgages and 10 residential mortgages, and you have to meet your credit ratios and that type of thing, which is fine, you know, but what if I want to do more than 10?
Right.
And then what? Okay, well, you go to this other lender, but then you're capped out on this, and it just, you need to do other options at some point if you want other results. So that's what I started doing. So it was just another solution in order to get stuff done. And it turned into an extremely beneficial win-win solutions scenario for people that are looking to place money from their refinances or money that they've had saved up in their RSPs or TFSAs, because that can be placed as well, and provide really solid returns tied to an asset. So it is just another solution that people maybe don't normally look at because the interest rates are higher, but let's just say you're paying even, let's just call it 20% interest on a loan that's 6 months long. Realistically, that's what you paid is 10% over 6 months instead of if it's a 20% annual interest rate. And if it's an interest-only payments, that's, you know, that's so worth it to get a deal done where you're 5xing your money. It's
right.
a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, I'm sure our audience can gather by this point you're, an incredibly busy guy, and it sounds like you're touching a lot of things. So I won't hold you for too long because we do appreciate you coming on. But if you could maybe take some of your experiences, because it sounds like you've been there, you've been through the hard stuff, you've seen all areas of the operations, and you've really had a lot of success. If there's any piece of advice you could maybe give to our audience about just growth and doing this well, what maybe is one or two takeaways that you would have for people who are maybe in that initial stage you were 3 years ago? They've got a couple of properties, they're looking to grow, but now we're getting into some tougher times and they may have to take the road less traveled like you have. What is some advice that you can pass on to maybe some people who are growing?
What I was doing back then is when I saw a new opportunity or a new way to make money or something like that I hadn't done before, or maybe even hadn't seen other people doing, I felt like it was a weird thing, but I see it a lot from the questions I get from my Instagram followers that DM me. They feel, and I felt, like you have to ask permission from someone to do it. And an example of that is, hey, James, I found this deal. This is the numbers. Seems to make money. What do you think? Well, why the hell are you asking me? Because you know it already works. You're asking me because you're hoping that I'll say, yeah, you should do this. And give yourself that permission. You don't need some random internet stranger to tell you that when you've run the numbers, you've done the deal, you've done a couple deals already. Give yourself the permission to do something else and have multiple exits maybe, so that if one thing fails, you have another couple exits. If you're really worried, but just do it. Instead of waiting for someone out there to give you permission, do it.
That's great. That's amazing. Well, James, it's been a pleasure. I hope we can do this again. Thank you so much for making the time, and that was a lot of value. Thank you so much.
No worries at all.